we wanted to spend some time talking to you all today about a little project that we took on probably almost close to, what, a year ago, 6 months to a year ago, yeah, around tracking school tardiness. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm from the Regional Education Laboratory Mid-Atlantic. So I don't know how many of you have come by and stolen the little bendy pens and the stress pencils and all that stuff at the booth right around the corner from the registration desk. But the Regional Education Laboratory, if you don't know, this will give you some context as to sort of how Robin and I got connected and theoretically what is available to all of you. The Regional Educational Laboratory seeks to work with stakeholders, folks like yourselves, right? State and local education agencies, teachers, principals, researchers, with the purpose of gaining access to useful research and data, okay? And then more importantly, how to make use of that, how to analyze it, so that you can change policy and impact students, okay? That's our goal. And we really sort of function under the umbrella of how do we do all that while focusing on the high priority needs of the region. We are currently the Mid-Atlantic, right? It serves Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and DC. There are 10 other laboratories across the country. So if you have colleagues in other states, they have similar types of services and access that I'm going to talk about in their regions as well. So if we move along. So the way that the labs function and try to provide those services, we start by looking at the graphic and talk about needs assessment. We accomplish needs assessment primarily, at least the way I think about it, in two ways. One is each one of the jurisdictions in our area, all of the 5, including Pennsylvania, we have state coordinators. Here in Pennsylvania, we actually have 2. Harris Sokoloff is the kind of covers more or less the eastern half of the state, and Jerry Zahorchak covers the western half of the state. Those folks are tasked with going out into the communities, attending board meetings, networking, developing relationships with LEA folk, SEA folk, to try to keep tabs on what is it that you all need to do what you're tasked with doing. What kind of research, what kind of information can we provide that helps you do your jobs more effectively? Okay? Based upon what we learn from those representatives, we then try to encourage folks to participate in research alliances. So we have a number of research alliances. They're organized around topics. We have an early childhood research alliance. We have a dropout prevention one. We have a teacher effectiveness one. The one that's most relevant here is we have one called the Longitudinal Data Use Research Alliance. So once we figure out what your needs are, we sort of try to bring you into the fold by saying, look, if you've got a particular interest around how to use longitudinal data or a data system, why don't you participate in our Longitudinal Data Use Research Alliance, which is made up of folks like yourselves, stakeholders who are coming in with basically similar types of problems, questions, or issues. And we meet periodically throughout the year. I think there's at least 4 virtual meetings and 1 in-person meeting. And it's all organized around what kind of things can we provide to you, what kind of services, what kind of benefits that are going to help you do your job. So based upon that needs assessment, there's really two sort of buckets that we can organize things in. We can talk about direct research services. So maybe the easiest one to think about is teacher effectiveness. So maybe you've got some issues around teacher effectiveness that you want some research conducted on. As long as we go through an approval process with the federal government and Institute for Education Sciences, we can engage in direct research. We can come in and design an evaluation study. We can conduct some empirical research using your data. We get data sharing agreements, all that sort of stuff, and we can provide that to you. The other big bucket that we're going to focus on here is technical assistance products and services. So what does that mean? So we've got all these different things. We can do bridge events where we bring experts in a particular area, and they'll come in and they'll talk about the research and how you can make use of it. We can do organized trainings for you around a particular topic, workshops on how to use data, webinars where we basically use a virtual platform and we have experts come in and give a talk on a particular topic. We've developed how-to guides, white papers, the Ask a REL service. This one's a pretty popular one that we're really trying to publicize, where you can basically ask questions of the RELs and we can get an answer for you. Now that seems pretty simple. So if you are doing, let's say you want to know what does the current literature tell us about the impact of attendance on student achievement. You can file that question for us. We can search an existing database of information that we've compiled in the past, and we go out and we search newer information. We compile that and give you a response and give you a list of resources summarized nicely that you can use for whatever your purposes are. We've also been developing more recently the resource hubs. These are smaller subdivided resources on the internet that you can gain access to. The one that we're going to talk about today is how to access and connect to longitudinal data systems. And that'll bring into the fold how Robin and I sort of got connected.
Okay. Well, in the fall, I am the Director of Data Quality Reporting and Performance Analysis for Spring Cove School District. We have a little bit under 2,000 students. We outsource our PowerSchool service to IU21, and Cheryl Peters, who's sitting right here, is my main contact. I have her on speed dial. The fall of 2014, our superintendent, Dr. Videla, asked me to start watching absence patterns. And I'm a psychometrician, so I look for rhythm in data. And I started seeing that we had a lot of kids who might have been at school for part of the day, but they were coming in late in the morning or they were leaving early. And these were unexcused absences, right? They were minutes of lost instructional time. And for our PowerSchool SIS, those absences were counts. That person was tardy 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, right? But I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I don't want to count. I want to know how many minutes of lost instruction these students have had. Because being tardy 5 times for 1 minute is very, very different than being tardy 3 times for, let's say, 45 minutes at a pop, or 78 minutes at a pop, or somebody leaving school because he wants to go snowmobiling the last, 50 minutes of school so his parents pick him up, right? Because we live in a very rural area, and it's farming and it's all types of different things, and sometimes academics are not their main focus. So anyway, we've got this community-wide culture at Spring Cove where, the kids will get to school when they can. And that's problematic. What I wanted to see was how many minutes of lost instruction did we have? And then I wanted to run a cumulative total, because according to Pennsylvania state attendance laws, all those minutes can be added up for an unexcused day, right? So I started working with that. Cheryl worked with me, and we were able to export data out of PowerSchool. And then I had SPSS on my private computer from graduate school. I loaded that. Well, I loaded it into Excel and then into SPSS, and I did my own coding to start running these totals, okay? It was a very cumbersome process. It took me like a day and a half to get all these totals from my for my students. One thing that I couldn't do with my protocol was that I also wanted to look at household address, because what we did find was that people were playing us. Let's say that they had a child with one last name at one school and a child with another last name at another school. We're trying to track attendance. We don't even know that these kids live at the same address, right? And so what I said to Dr. Videla was, it would really be nice if I could have some kind of report that was address-centric, where I could watch attendance patterns for various students. And eventually, what we did with Jason's help was that now we take those address-centric reports, in addition to the unexcused minutes reports, into our student assistance program meetings, and we can intervene on a family level or a household level for those students. So basically, that's what he asked me to do. I'm sitting here in my little office in the middle of nowhere with Mennonite carriages riding in front of my window, saying, okay, well, I'm doing the best that I can here, but it's taking too much time. So then Kazia called me, Kazia from Mid-Atlantic REL, and said, we've got this guy who's working on some of these technical things. Could you just see if it works? And so I was kind of a tester. I said, okay, I'll do that. And then Jason and I started talking. I said, Jason, here's what I'm trying to do. And he says, whoa, 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 I can help you with this. So Jason was my knight in shining armor. He totally automated what I wanted to do. He and Cheryl worked together to automate this for me. Now I've got an Excel spreadsheet that sits on my desktop, and I push a button and it automatically updates whenever I push that button. So I can send my reports out daily, weekly, however I want to. And he did it for free, which is always great. And the thing that's great about Jason is that he also made it available so that any school district that wants it can also, you guys can contact Jason and you can get it put on your computers for free. So that's what this is all about. Is that right?
We can talk about that.
Oh, okay.
What, the free part?
No, a lot of it depends upon, as I'm hearing over the last day or so, is what SIS you're using. So this particular application was built around PowerSchool, which made it nice for me because prior to working for the lab, I worked for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools in North Carolina. North Carolina is a PowerSchool-wide state. So when I learned that this was PowerSchool, it made it easier for me because I was already familiar with a lot of the table names, data joins, and all those types of things. But as I've heard, many of you are dealing with things other than PowerSchool. Theoretically, as long as you have a database on the back end that is storing and collecting attendance or information, and connections can be enabled to those, you can get the same type of thing. That's all we did was instead of using that PowerSchool interface that probably most of you are used to seeing, which is, I'm assuming, like a web-based portal, right? We went around that and got right into the database on the back end of it where all that good stuff that you're looking at is actually stored, and pulled it out that way so that we're taking out some of the manual steps that Robin was having to go through.
So it was wonderful because I could say to Jason, okay, this is my vision. These are the data I want to collect, and this is how I want to give voice to this data. And he was able, with Cheryl, to do it. And so it was wonderful. Now, you know with ESSA that we're going to be looking at absenteeism quite a bit more. And do y'all know what the definition of chronic absenteeism is? It's 10%. missed days. So that's 18 total days. Now, when you start thinking about kids coming in late and leaving early, and you're starting to roll up all those days, that's a lot of lost instructional time. It just is. What's the next?
Advanced on that, so.
Did you? Okay. So I guess my question now, according to ESSA, the school districts will be allowed to spend federal dollars on training to reduce absenteeism. From my point of view, you can only isolate absenteeism patterns when you know how many lost instructional minutes are due to like certain types of absenteeism, certain days of absenteeism, and certain events preceding absenteeism, like bullying, sporting events, those types of things. We started to see patterns once we were looking at these data. If there was a big divisional championship game, you know, the night before, you have more absenteeism. First day of hunting season for us, we have that one particular day off school, but when you look at the couple days after that, we have a lot of absenteeism patterns too, because people are still hunting. So, okay, so my monthly report creation was a 3-step process. It took me a day and a half each week, which I really didn't have that time. I would, you know, bring it home and sit in front of the TV and watch The Voice or whatever and try to do this. So Cheryl helped me, pardon me?
Gotta watch it tonight.
I know, it's big tonight. So anyway, Cheryl Peters at IU21, who is as heroic in her way as
I have a team
you are,
too, so
yeah,
it's not just me by myself.
as Jason is in his way. She helped me create an export syntax. I exported that data into Excel, cleaned it, and then exported it into my personal copy of SPSS. Okay, and then I used my coding to generate my cumulative totals and analyze the data. What I did with the people I work with was that I used cumulative data, and then I would let them know so-and-so has lost a day due to unexcused minutes, so-and-so's lost 2 days or 3 days, and then Cheryl created another code in PowerSchool that was the signal that we've now lost X number of days. Each day of unexcused minutes we would load into the system.
Can I ask, how did you get involved with 21? You're IU8, right?
We contract out to IU21 for all of our PowerSchool services. We don't maintain a server at our school. So these are what my reports look like. This is my SPSS report. It did the job. It was fairly inelegant, but that's all I could do, and I just wanted the data. Can you see, like, now you got to remember with grade 12, when a student reaches 17 years of age, the attendance laws change. But this is just for example. Can you see that I've got the minute absent on this day, the 13th of November? I've got minutes absence, total minutes absence. I'm running my, and then what I did was that I divided this by the number of minutes in the school day, so I know the percentage of the school day, right? Okay, and I also know the number of cases listed, and if we have to take people to the district magistrate, all these data are right there. The principals and the secretaries have them. Okay, do you see this person lost 2/3 of a day on excused minutes? And do you see, like, this person's running 68, 62 minutes, 3 minutes, 17 minutes. This is an 11th grader. At some point in time, somebody must have intervened, because you can see the 22nd of April, those things stopped, right? So you can see sometimes patterns of intervention with principals or assistant principals or guidance counselors. You can see those unexcused minutes start to just wane when somebody intervenes, which is what that report's supposed to do. Okay. I think that's good. Okay, so in terms of what Jason did for me, when he automated that report for me and literally just sits on my desktop and I push a button, so he saved me a lot of time. Errors are lessened. It's closer to real-time information. A principal can even call me and say, you know what, Robin, can you just run that report for me today? Well, yes, I can. The data are more secure because we're not going through 2 or 3 different systems, right? And it's scalable. Now, the other thing that I asked Jason to do was to color code my data. So for unexcused minutes totaling up to 1 day, he codes them yellow. Between 1 day and 2 days, he codes them orange. And between, I think, 2 days and 3 days, codes them red. And that way, the administrators can just look and say, okay, how bad is it, right? Okay.
So for this particular solution, the components of the automated solution, right? So PowerSchool, right, in this particular instance. Open database connectivity. Basically, how can you get your machine, your computer, to talk to the PowerSchool? In this case, it's an Oracle database. So by working with Cheryl at IU21, they were able to set me up with a login and password so that I have secure access to get into the data system. They also gave me nice step-by-step directions to set up that ODBC or database connectivity. And then what I wanted to be able to do was use something that most people have. So again, Robin's using a statistics package from her graduate school. Most people in the school system, they don't have access to that, but a lot of people generally have access to something like Excel. Now, Excel has come a long way over the years, and now it's got a lot of built-in querying and Power Pivot capabilities that you can do a lot of, or set it up to do a lot of data processing right inside Excel without having to go to other types of software. So the first thing you've got to do, right, you got to figure out you've got different types of bits. In other words, how does your software function on your computer? So you figure out whether or not you've got a 32 or 64-bit application, and then you have to download the ODBC or database connectivity drivers. Basically, it's a little applet or software that installs, and it basically helps your computer talk to the PowerSchool database. There's a little file that gives you the location. The intermediate folks shared that with us, so that basically it says, go to this server location. It's going to ask you for the username and password that they set us up with, and then you've got a database. Now, that's a really quick breeze through to a lot of different little steps, but out on our REL website, one of the resource hubs that I mentioned in the beginning was a step-by-step process for how to create these types of connections to your longitudinal data systems using either Excel, SPSS, or SAS. So if you go out to the REL Mid-Atlantic website and go to the resource hubs, there are literally step 1, and it's a slide basically for each step with screenshots and directions of how to go more or less from beginning to end and set these things up so that you can connect to the data system that you might be using. And so I don't know how many of you are real familiar with Excel, but if you go to the new data tab at the top, you'll see now that there are a number of different buttons that you can use to query databases. You can even set it up to query regular Excel files or text files you may have on your desktop. I know the latest version now, you can query SharePoint sites if you've got those. There's a connection for Facebook. I don't know exactly what you're querying, but it's there. I've never tried it. Big data, Hadoop connections, these are all things that are starting to come up a little bit in the education sector. It's very much more prominent in banking and healthcare. But now, because of you don't have your data limitations, right? Excel can handle a lot of data now compared to what it could do 10, 15 years ago. You can pull things right out of that data system, right into Excel, and do what you need to do. And so PowerSchool and many other SISs, they store information in separate tables behind the scenes. So when you folks are accessing that nice GUI web-based interface, it does a lot of work to take information from different places behind the scenes and put it up on a screen in a way that looks nice, is easily navigatable, and makes it easy for you to input things or get information that you can see. But essentially, so PowerSchool has one table, and all it has in it is attendance. It's got a record for every absence for every kid on that day. So if I'm absent today, it's got a record for today. If I'm absent yesterday, it's got a record for that day. And however many days I'm absent for all the kids in Spring Cove, okay? Then there's a separate tab, and the separate tab is attendance codes. So when you look at the attendance table, right, this first one, all you're going to see is a running rows of records of dates, but it doesn't really tell you what kind of absence it was. Was it excused? Was it unexcused? Was the kid tardy? Right? So you've got to make those connections. That's what that GUI interface does for you when you access it through the web. But here, what we're going to have to do is set up our queries to merge all that information for you. So the attendance codes table is a little table, and it's got a common key. It's got an ID field in there and an ID field in the attendance table. And we use that to link it up so we know what kind of attendance or absence occurred on that particular day. The other thing we needed to know was schools. We wanted to be able to create a spreadsheet that we could filter by schools so that if she wants to send it to one of her high schools, she can send it to the high school. If she wants to send it to the elementary school, we can click a filter, and then all you've got is the elementary school on the tab. So we need to be able to pull in school information. Well, that's in a different table. Got to link it up by an ID. And then, of course, we need to know the students, right? We need to know their names so that it makes sense to the school-based staff. In particular, like Robin talked about, we wanted to know addresses because we wanted to be able to link up and try to figure out, can we identify kids that might not necessarily have the same name but living in the same household. We also wanted their grade level. So we've got to set things up so that we can link all these pieces of information on the back end. So you can see I blacked out a lot of the information that would be potentially identifiable. But essentially, when we pull into Excel, this is the attendance table that I was talking about. You've got a running record of the day that an absence or some sort of missed school occurred and the number of minutes. The year ID is 25, which stood for 2015-16. You've got school IDs over there. What we want to focus on is our tardies. Okay? So the attendance code ID in the first column in the top table is linked to the ID field in the attendance code. So now we know that those records up there in table 1 are unexcused tardies. And you can do that for all the different types of absences. In this case, we're just focused on the tardies. Okay? So what we're going to essentially do is we're going to bring this field up here so that we know what kind of absences we're dealing with. So now we've got it up here, and now we go to the next step in the process. I want to know what school did these attendance issues occur at. So same thing, we can link by the school numbers, now I had to black them out here, by the school IDs up in that top table. And when we link it up, we can drop the school names in on the side because not necessarily everybody's not familiar with the ID numbers, but we want the names to make the report look nice. Okay? Then we've got to pull the student information. So you can see I've dummied out and used the candy bars so that I can show you what we were trying to do. And so I took the various pieces of the address and just squished them all together and concatenated them into a single field so that we can search on that. Right? We can sort records by that address and we can find kids at that same address. Okay? And we want to bring that up here as well, so now we know, well, what address is linked to and kid is linked to each type of attendance issue that we had. And so in the end, we've got the type of absence, the school, the name, last first, the address, the grade level, and then the total minutes. Okay? So now we've got all the information in one place in Excel. Now the issue is we want to do some calculations on all that stuff. So Excel now, you can do these things. You can set up these things called packages. And basically, they're just little routines that Excel will do to do your calculations for you sort of on the fly. So we needed a few of them, right? We needed a running total. So let's total up the number of minutes that have been missed up through each date. Okay? And there's a reason for that. I'll show you when we get to the actual screenshots of the report. We wanted to know the total number of minutes summed up through today. Now, when I say today, think about today meaning the day the report is run. So if it's up through today, it's the total number of minutes missed all year long up through today. Okay? And then we wanted one that was the total number of minutes up through yesterday. And the reason we want that is because I wanted to be able to flag kids who missed a day today. I wanted to alert somebody to say, hey, we had a kid that missed today, and here's his cumulative total. So that maybe you need to go down and say to him, so what happened today? Where were you? What's going on? If it's a pattern, okay? And then we wanted the home count. So in other words, tell me, how many kids do we have based upon that concatenated address? How many kids we got living at those different addresses? Because what Robin shared with me was, I want to know if we've got an issue at a single address. Maybe we've got multiple kids all having the same types of patterns. So we wanted to count by address. And so when we do that, like Robin showed you with her word-based or SPSS-based, you get the running total, which is the total number of minutes, okay, and then a cumulative sum down here at the bottom through today and through yesterday. Okay, when I ran this, they happen to be the same. And then the home count for that kid or address. And then here is your total number of minutes divided by, in this case, 443. So the number of minutes is the number of instructional minutes the kid should have at that school. It changes by school. So I believe 443, this is a high school report.
Yeah.
The elementary schools or middle schools have a different number of minutes. So I programmed that in on the back end so that depending upon what school, what school is associated with that record, it calculates the total appropriately. So that depending upon whether you want to view elementary schools or high schools, you're seeing the appropriate ratio of minutes missed.
What's that home count again? Does that mean there's just one kid at that resident? What's the home count?
Yeah, so in that, whatever the address was for Kit Kat, that means she's the only student that was in that database. Yes. If it was you and I at that address, that count would say 2. Yeah. So once I had all that stuff pulled into Excel, we set up a pivot table. There's nothing any more complicated, at least from the perspective of if you know how to set up a pivot table. We used a filter at the top, so like I said, you could pick, there's high schools, 2 middle schools, and 3 elementary schools, or something like that. So you could pick whichever school you happen to be interested in. You've got the student's name, the absence change, which I'll talk about that in a minute, and then the grade level for that student, and then the running list of the days that were missed, the tardies, the number of minutes, the total number of minutes missed, and then the total number of days. And so the absence change was set up so that when it's run, it'll flag a kid based upon the last time the report was ran as to whether or not they've been tardy again. So like Robin was saying, whether she opens it up or whether the principal opens it up, they can very quickly scroll down through, and anybody flagged as red with an increase, they know right away who they need to focus on. If there's no change, there's no coloring involved. Okay?
Now, since we did these PowerPoints, we have Jason 2.0, and so now this isn't quite up to a day, but if I had a day, this block would come up yellow. If it if it totaled to a day, okay? And if I had 2 days, it would, that next block would be orange, okay?
Right. And so this is the home address function. So inside the spreadsheet that we generated for Robin, there's 2 tabs. There's the one that gives you the last report, and then there's one that's organized by address. So essentially, we aggregate up by the student level and give you the address and say, okay, here are the students that have the same address, and here's their pattern. So you can quickly figure out if you've got 2 or 3 kids at the same address exhibiting some sort of pattern, then you can come at it from the home-based perspective.
The guidance counselors love that report.
And so once we got that running, and Rob and I worked on that together to make sure that, because essentially what the strategy that I used was I set it up on my end, and I got it to run where I work, right? And then I said, okay, if I can get it to run where I work, now we'll work on getting it to run on her end. So we had quite a few conference calls to make sure that she could do everything that she needed to do to get it up and running. Then once we got it up and running, we said, okay, wouldn't it be nice if we could just set it up so that every morning when you walk in, it's run? Because essentially PowerSchool at the end of the day, after everybody goes home, right, it's doing its whole little refresh routine at the end of the day. So what I wanted to be able to do was say, okay, Robin, when you come in the morning, you're going to have data that's current as of close of business yesterday. So you're going to know whether or not a kid was tardy or exhibited some other sort of pattern. And so you can set up a tiny little, it's called a little batch file. And again, all this about how to set these things up is all part of the resource hub on the REL Mid-Atlantic website. And it's there in a way that you can copy and paste it so that if you want to set it up. But essentially what you're doing is it's a little bit of code that basically tells your computer, I want you to open up the spreadsheet and I want you to refresh those queries using the connections and refresh the reports and save it back out. So that when Robin comes in the morning, she's got the current as of yesterday. And then what you can do is you can set it up to run whenever you want. If you have Windows-based computer, you have a task scheduler. You can go into that task scheduler and you point it at that batch file and you say, I want to run it every day at 2 o'clock, or I want to run it every morning at 3:30, or whenever the case may be. Or you can just open up the spreadsheet and click refresh, like Robin said, in the middle of the day. Like, I want to know whether or not Johnny was at school today, you know. And you hit the button and it'll run right then for you, okay? So remember that the whole reason we wanted to do this was because, you know, Robin and I got connected through the Longitudinal Data Use Research Alliance. And so we didn't intend for today to be able to enable all of you to go back and recreate what we did on your own, right? What we wanted to be able to do, or at least part of what I wanted to be able to do, was to show you that these types of things are possible. And that with the right type of help that the laboratory can provide, you can do it and it's not that intensive. There's a lot of technical stuff, but that's where you bring technical people in to do that stuff for you. But the issue is, right, is that sometimes you can't get exactly what you want out of the systems that you have available. And sometimes the people that are helping with those systems don't have the time to give you the type of customized stuff that you need. There are other ways to go about it. And so that's what we really tried to do, was I wanted to be able to give her exactly what she needed in the easiest way possible. And so by doing those resource hubs, we're giving people information to proceed on their own, and we use this more or less as a guinea pig to test and say, can it be done? Do the directions make sense? Are they easy enough to follow? And can people at least get to a very good point where they can access the lab and say, Jason, you know what? I've taken it to step 8 and I can't get any farther, and here's what I'm trying to do. And then we can help you from there to figure out what it is that you're trying to do. Because that way everybody's empowered, at least to some degree, to access those data systems that you have. Okay?
And I would just say, Jason and his team, they're incredible people and a fantastic resource. And we were very blessed to have them help us. So,
Are there any questions?
Do you, so you really focused on tardiness.
Mhm.
So let's say a kid is unexcused for a full day.
Mhm.
That feeds into the system as well. If you're really looking to try to find out, you know, when that you targeted at 10%, because of the attendance and so.
well, in terms of PowerSchool, there's already a code. If a person is absent for a day, there's already a code that we can put in and it totals it up on another report. The data that were dropped were all these minutes. And it was, as I said, the only way that they were being monitored were by counts. So that was just a glitch in the way the PowerSchool system works. I understand, like, there were some other SPSSs where they do quantify minutes of lost instruction, but to my knowledge, they don't have the address report, because I've talked to other people about that. And I would say when you're doing interventions, that address report can be really, really helpful to people.
Yeah, but there's essentially a 4-digit code that denotes what type of absence it is. So, like, if you wanted to know the cumulative number of absences by address, I could probably go into that, and all I would have to do is change the 4-digit code that's flagging the tardies that she's interested in and change it to unexcused absence code, and it would run on that, because it's essentially accessing every type of attendance record that's been input, whether it's a full day, minutes, whatever the case may be. Yeah, so it'll run, it's pointed at those attendance tables. Yeah?
Did you find you had to do some data cleansing of the address and how it was entered into the SIS, meaning road could be RD, ROAD, or do you have to establish standards for entering addresses so then you could drill down to the address level?
I don't remember encountering any kind of those issues, because for the kids,
Yeah.
Central registry of InfoSnap.
We have InfoSnap with central registration, and the secretaries, we've come up with a protocol as to how they are to enter addresses. So,
yeah, so that was pretty straightforward for me, as far as all I had to do was collapse it all together and I could sort, and it's not like I found, like you're saying, I didn't find one that was listed RD and one that was listed road, and so it treats them separately. So from that perspective, it was pretty clean. Cool. You're welcome.